That Mary's eyes look like this, I think we could guess that. I think so. We have more data for the stable, actually. For the stable. The picture of it being a separate building in the back 40 somewhere doesn't work. It doesn't work. Almost certainly, like 99.9%, it's a room in the house with everybody else. It's a room in the house with everybody else. We know that from archaeology. We know that from anthropological perspective. We know that a room, the animals provide warmth in the wintertime. When they're in, they're the heat. They are your resource. You don't take your bank account, cash it into gold, and spread it out on the field, right? Where somebody, you keep it with you. This is your bank account. And that it would be close. And we have this. We have buildings from the 1st century. Foundation remains. We have buildings from the Iron Age, the Old Testament. And we have still standing houses among the villages where that happens. Right in. The animals on the lower level, if it's a multi-story house, where the heat goes up, then they can just kind of graze out and come back in again, and the people live up above. The people up. More than that, the language in the Gospel of Luke, that there was no room in the inn. There was no room in the inn. This is an unfortunate English translation. There were inns for pay in the 1st century and in the Roman world. The parable of the Good Samaritan, where the Samaritan finds the guy all beat up and brings him to an inn and pays money to take care. There were such institutions. But the word in Luke is not that word. The word in Luke, kataluma, means guest room. A guest room, every house had one. Every house has public space and private space. Your house has public space and private space. Where people off the street who you don't know, you'll only take them in certain rooms, but not other ones, probably. And your grandkids, they can go all the way in, right? You know, and certainly in the ancient Near East, including the modern Near East. And the kataluma was the public room up front, where people traveling would stay, or public things would happen, reconciliation between two families, where the fathers would get together, you see, and work out an agreement, or where the wedding feast would take place, things like that, as opposed to the inmost room, which is the birthing room. Not the birthing room, but the room of the homeowner, the where life is created, right? I mean, that room, way in the back, right? Where not just anybody goes. No room in the guest room. So there is room in the stable. It's the same building. It's inconceivable that when Joseph and Mary come to Bethlehem, that they're not staying with relatives. I think you can say that 100%. Based on every scrap of data we have. There is no data that says otherwise, other than Christmas cards. There is no data from the ancient world that says they're not staying with relatives. Our daughter, our oldest daughter, was ready, grew up here in Jerusalem on campus. Our daughter was ready to go to college. Our campus manager at the time he's Palestinian village, living in Jerusalem. Their oldest daughter was ready to go to university. He scraped enough money to send her to a school in America at the same time that our daughter was going. So we had the conversation. He said to us, "Where are you sending Jessica?" We said, "To Bethel College," which was where Diane and I went and met. "Oh, where's she going to stay?" "In the dorm." "Oh. Well, who do you know who is there?" Meaning family. "Well, we don't have any family in Minnesota. We don't have any. She's going to stay in the dorm with somebody she hasn't met yet." "Well, why would you do that?" So I asked him, "Where are you sending Jumana for school?" And he mentioned a junior college in eastern Pennsylvania. "Oh, well, if you're going to go to America all the way to it, why go to because that's where her cousins live. She's going to stay with her cousins. And that's the school next door. Of course that's where she would go." I mean, it's inconceivable that Mary and Joseph, if they're in the house of lineage of David, do not stay with family in Bethlehem. You just don't do it otherwise. You don't. You can have never met them, but you track the lineage back. Ah, great-grandparents were brothers. way it has to work. There is no room in the guest room. Now that can be one of two things. I'll let you choose. All right, here we don't. I'll let you choose. Number one, number two. Number one, most commentators say this. Too many people in town for the tax enrollment, for the census. All the rooms are full. Maybe. Or the family was already too big, right? Maybe. Let me give you a third one that doesn't show up in the commentaries, but happens in Bethlehem. Well, not anymore, because now we have hospitals where babies are born. But you talk to some of the ladies your age in Bethlehem, here's what they say happened to them. Let's say, 2 or 3 generations ago. Giving birth in the home, calling the midwives. The moment has come for the bloody mess. And the women were taken out of the home, down one level into the stable where they gave birth, where the bloody messes are. And then when the baby was wrapped, brought back up and received into the family. Yeah. Reading the line, there is no room in the inn, in the Kataluma, not because it's so full, but come on, there's no room for this here. Go down where it's supposed to be. And then come up. You can take any of those options you want. All of them are the same package in saying this family is providing and protecting for its own. And it's the kind of a birth, this is the key. It's the kind of a birth that is, except for the miracle part of the conception, all right? Except for that, right? It's like, except for that, Mrs. Lincoln, how else was the play, right? So, except for the miracle of the birth, of the conception, the birth of Jesus, according to all the data we have, was absolutely 100% like everybody else. As it says in Philippians, one of us. He became like one of us, exactly like your birth would have been. Which is as incarnate as you can possibly think of. We want to put halos on everybody. Yeah. Absolutely normal. I think that's where it's taking us. That's number 2. Yes.
Would the family have laid in the trough,
well, eventually up. Maybe the shepherds are coming right away and they're bringing their stuff in and they're still receiving them down there. Perhaps. Kind of have to pound the details down in different ways, I think. I think so, yes.
Your explanation settles something in my mind, because if the relatives didn't vacate the room for somebody, for a young bride giving birth,
Yeah.
I can't imagine that. Unless then it's a stigma that she's unwed,
Yeah,
and therefore
right,
I'm not going to give my room up for her.
right.
I mean, it makes you think
Right.
the relatives were louses for not making room for her.
Right. Unless the practice is to have the birth down below. Yeah. None of these scenarios were able to nail down all the corners of the carpet, but I think they're at least tracking in the right direction as possibilities. And work with them. I mean, read the stories again, work with it, do some thinking about the ancient Near East and see where you end up.
Who says
See where you
it could
end
have
up,
been
yeah.
a combination of several things?
Yeah.
Because there's more than one story in the Bible about the women being banished to another house even during their monthly, and so
There
that
is.
coupled with the fact that she was unwed, maybe.
The process of giving birth in a kosher Jewish home is something that makes the woman unclean and the people attending unclean. All right, now you're bringing in another element that needs to be brought in. All right. Depends on how kosher Joseph and Mary were. Are they wanting to keep Jewish ritual law or not so much? The Palestinians don't care. They don't keep Jewish ritual law, so that's another element we have to add on to it. And in fact, another reason to take them into the stable and not make the rest of, and a reason to keep him in the manger for a while and not to bring him up into the house. It gives that extra distance that we need. It does. It's
And if her family was priestly,
even more so.
wouldn't give birth in the house where everyone would be unclean.
Even more so. Even more so. Exactly. Exactly. So I think there's enough here to start to see some details that are possible. That are possible. And I don't want to put an X on the ground in the story, but it's suggestive to me, I think.
Maybe a gold star.
Maybe. There's something there.
We can speculate all day. There are some things we can rule out. There are some things we can speculate forever on.
What can be ruled out has to be ruled out.
Yeah.
And what I tend to do, if I'm going to err, and I'm sure that happens a lot, I'd prefer to err on the side of as much as we know happened in the first century as possible. And just leave it at that. Just leave it at that. The last one is this. I can make this one quick. The Gospel of Luke chapter 2, verse 8. Now there were shepherds in the fields keeping watch over their flock by night. Yep. Two clues in that verse that say this did not happen in December. Sorry. Shepherds, first of all, shepherds in the fields. December is when the fields are being plowed and planted with grain. And maybe just starting to shoot up a little bit. And that's the kind of good eating that sheep and goats would love to have. Yeah? And December into January is when, if the rain has been decent that year, you saw it from Herodian, out there a little bit. You can see past the farms, you've got grazing land when the fields are growing. And so you graze the sheep out a bit, or on the edges, or away from the fields. Once the grain is cut, you've got stubble. That's good for the sheep and the goats to eat. They can fertilize the field a bit and get ready for the next plowing the next year. That would put shepherds in the field in May, late May, June, July, August, September, something like that.